Hello, and welcome to the second lecture of the Innate Immunity PowerPoint series. And today we'll go over innate immunity, and we'll discover what the innate immunity is comprised of, and learn the terms first and second line of defense. All right. So, as you can see above me, we have some three different classes. Okay, we have physical defenses, chemical defenses, and cellular defenses. Okay, and these all are considered innate immunity. Okay, and then when we say innate immunity, remember we are usually typically born with this. There are genetic and progressional and congenital defects in these systems, but for the most part, we are talking about the healthy individual who's not infected with pathogens. Okay, so the physical defenses that we mention are our first line of defense. Okay, so the physical defenses involve uh, physical barriers and mechanical barriers. Okay, so these can be fluids. Okay, so um, and then the fluids can contain some chemicals as well. Okay, so and then some of our cells can be adaptive also. Okay, so there's a lot of crossover that we need to just kind of take in stride as we learn these barriers and just kind of assume the role of okay, right? Like I am okay understanding that these are physical barriers because they make sense this way, okay? But if I read another question, it might be that the skin is also a chemical barrier because of the sebum that it produces, okay? So uh, don't think of it as trying to Venn diagram well, don't think of it as you have to slot everything into a particular um, position rather than that everything's kind of like a Venn diagram. Sometimes, most of the time, it's innate physical, whereas sometimes it has some chemical properties. And we'll learn those individually. Okay, so the physical defenses are like physical barriers, the skin, the eyes. Mechanical defenses are the peristalsis, the not letting something come in, stomach acid, all that good stuff. Okay, um, yeah, and so even the microbiome on our skin or in our gut help prevent us from getting infections as well. We also have chemical defenses, which are the second line of defense. Okay, and the cellular defenses are also considered in the second line of defense. Okay. Um, But for the most part, we're talking about the chemical defenses here. And so we're talking about antimicrobial peptides, cytokines, inflammation factors, and chemicals in the enzymes in the bodies. Okay, so whereas tears can flush and urine can flush, sometimes there is antibodies and chemicals or chemicals and enzymes in those that also do additional things as well, and that would be the second line. And then we have our white blood cells, granulocytes and agranulocytes, those being with granules and those without. And we'll learn about all the cells that are involved in innate immunity, and then later adaptive immunity. And you can kind of see the prelude around me of a natural killer cell, and then here as a B cell. Okay, this is the one that's the highlight of innate immunity, and this is one of the ones that's a highlight for adaptive immunity. Okay, so our first line of defense, physical barriers, right? All those physical barriers that we just saw. Skin works as one, okay? And like remember what I said, mucus membranes that have mucus can help trap pathogens as well, okay? Cilia, small hair-like projections, help move the mucus and that trap them and contain them. They're all in that mucus ball, and then let's get it out. Okay, the skin barrier has 3 layers: epidermis on the outside, dermis in the middle, and then the hypodermis. Okay, the hypodermis is usually the fatty layer. And then whereas our epidermis continuously sheds all of the old cells. All those old cells shedding prevent any foreign bacteria from attaching to us, right? Any new stuff that we don't wash with our hands gets shed off rather quickly. The mucus in the goblet cells is produced by goblet cells, rather, and those mucus membranes help trap pathogens. The mucus is sticky, the pathogens get trapped, they can't go, and then we put the mucus out of our body, either into our stomach or we cough it out. Okay, and then the cilia that you can see here are projections into the trachea, and they will actually work the pathogens out using like a mucociliary escalator. They get it out of the lungs and then down into the stomach and then through the esophagus. Okay, and you can see how goblet cells are made here. Okay, and then we have the ones that I was saying. Remember, the fluids are still our first line of defense. They consider themselves mechanical and microbiome first line of defense, physical defense. Okay, so tears will even have antibodies. Saliva will have antibodies. They will be found in adaptive immunity. But when we say tears as a physical barrier, we mean the physical crying, flushing of the eyes. When we say saliva, and you don't have to cry to have tears, your eyes are constantly wet and you blink and that lubricates the eye and that gets shed. And then you get the crust, right? So we're not talking about physical crying, but it does flush through the tears. Saliva constantly being produced, urine flushes urethra and the lower reproductive system. And then even our microbiome competition makes it say, hey, someone's here, seat's taken, you can't attach, okay? Ready for the soap to just take it away, okay? And in the lab I talked about our keystone species being the starfish on the rock, okay? And, we are basically wanting to have the starfish. We want to have all of our microbiome. We want to have it because it increases our diversity, it keeps us healthier, and it keeps us happier. Okay, so we want to keep the diversity to keep out the bad stuff. Okay, the more we have diverse, the more chance that those will outcompete the bad stuff for the same resources. Okay, and then we have the second line of defense, or chemical defenses. Okay, and we have acidic pH. Okay, the pH is a chemical defense. It just the extra protons in the acid prevent the proton pump from working in our electron transport chain, right? So there'd be too much acid on the outside and those protons won't come in where we want them and it'll destroy us. Okay, antimicrobial enzymes in lysozyme and mucus. So whereas mucus can also trap things physically, it can also have enzymes that break stuff down. Okay, and then antimicrobial peptides. Okay, and this is one thing I found interesting is we even train our bodies to do this, right? We feed certain bacteria sebum to this fungus on us, and then it uses it as a food source. It produces oleic acid and makes us taste bad. Okay, that's what my biology teacher said day one. We smell bad and we taste bad as humans, and that's why we don't get hunted so much, right? It's also why we don't get bacterial infections through the skin so much, except if we're immunocompromised or get a nice big cut. Okay, and another chemical response of our second line of defense is the complement system. Okay, we talked about this in our case study. Remember, we could not turn off C1, okay, by inhibiting it. You know, these inhibitors will go there and turn off C1. We couldn't turn it off, so it just kept feeding this chain over and over again, okay? And so whatever the chain was going to do was going to happen for her. And in her case, Angela's case, it led to an amplification of the inflammatory response over and over and over again, okay? So be mindful of this. This is a group of genes that need to work in concert. They need to be turned off at the right time. They need to be turned on at the right time. And it is usually activated in response to infection. Okay, so she probably got sick and they couldn't turn off C1, had it in there, so on and so forth. Okay, so more than 30 proteins make up this system, and it's all about complement activation, chain reaction of inflammatory response, or enhancement of phagocytosis, or even just resulting in destruction of the pathogen. Cytokines. Again, this was elevated in Angela, and these were elevated because the body thought she had an infection, and it just kept producing these cytokines, okay, and telling her, hey, there's an infection, hey, there's an infection. Those cytokines got picked up in her airway, and the cells did what they were supposed to do. They started inflammation, okay? So the cytokines were communication signals between the cells, and since they didn't get shut off, the cytokines kept going, and it made it so that the cells kept proliferating, and inflammation happened. Okay, so cytokines are like the messengers of our innate immunity. Okay, they are chemical mediators, and you can do it autocrine style, paracrine style, or endocrine style, meaning you can either signal yourself, you can signal someone nearby, or you can signal someone far away, like the endocrine system does. Okay, and then we have interferons. Interferons and viruses go together like this. Okay, interferons are chemical mediators of the second line of defense that help against viruses. Okay, and then finally we have some genetic defenses against our that count as our second line of defense in our innate immunity. And these genetic defenses include the ones like sickle cell anemia that provide resistance to malaria. And remember, if you have 2 copies of sickle cell, you're going to be sick naturally. If you have no copies of the sickle cell gene, you are susceptible to malaria and may die before you can pass on your genes. However, if you have 1 copy of sickle cell and 1 normal copy of blood, then you are theoretically immune to malaria. Okay, and you will be sufficiently able to survive long enough to reproduce. And this is why sickle cell is prolific in places with high malaria outbreaks. Okay, and that's where we'll end this video. And I will get into hematopoiesis and a few other things from innate immunity before we wrap up in the next video.